Hello, Formula One fans, and welcome back to F1 in Focus. If you are unfamiliar with the show, we are the only podcast where a Lewis and a Max fan can very much get along in the wonderful world of Formula One and actually stay friendly during a season. Although now there's another Brit rising to the ranks, we might differ from opinion there, but let's see how the season ends up. My name's John, and I'll be your host. And with me is the man with the best hair in the business. It's none other than James Hazel.
Hello, how's it
All
going?
right. That's quite right. I should just make an intro or something with that. Let somebody make a theme song for you. The man with the best hair in the business.
No, let's not do that.
How you been?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks. Yeah, good
Uh,
race, good weekend
race,
in general.
yeah, race number
Yeah,
6 done.
yeah.
You look like you're about to get on a plane.
Yeah. I think I might have some plans coming up that
Uh,
require a flight or two.
do you think about this bonus podcast next week on some kind of tropical island where we just happen to be?
Yeah, I don't know what we'll do, but we'll figure something out.
Definitely no race, but we might have bonus podcast. Let's just see
Yeah,
what happens.
yeah,
James, race number 6 done. Time for Miami. Shall I try to summarize this race?
yeah. Go for it.
All right. So Miami, $180 for a sandwich. Ferrari hyping their HP partnership with teasing blue cars, but actually the ink actually ran out. So we had an extremely disappointing livery. RB bringing the real hype with their livery and writing everyone that they rather be called V Corp than RB. And they had the best race and weekend so far. Max was almost taken out by his teammate, which almost meant Checo would have signed his exit. A bizarre safety car. A point for Alpine, which is bizarre in its own right. Sargent definitely on the way to its exit. The same exit Checo almost ended up to be. Magnussen aiming to the same by gathering more penalty points we can count on one hand. And of course, Lando Norris taking his maiden win after 100 Grand Prix. Max also eliminated a bollard to make it easier for everyone else. Daniel Ricciardo fighting with the top on Saturday and with the flops on Sunday, and drivers that were punished extremely hard, and some that didn't get punished at all. Is that because they are Spanish? We'll find out in today's F1 in Focus.
Yeah, that's a great comment from Fernando.
Which
I'd
saying
almost
Spanish, I
forgotten
think he
about that one.
meant non-British.
Yeah, I'd almost forgotten about that one. Yeah, yeah.
So, James, can I just
Yeah.
say this was the first time Miami was sort of watchable?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, to be fair, last year was all right with mostly just because Max started down in like ninth place, didn't he? Had to
True.
fight his way through the field, had a brief fight with Perez, and then disappeared off into the sunset. This year's race a little bit different. Pretty good, pretty exciting, pretty tense at times. Yeah, I thought it was a really good weekend for Formula One. The sprint race was also pretty decent as well, so not a
Pretty
lot to
decent. The
complain
sprint race
about.
was awesome. What
Yeah,
can I say?
exactly. Yeah, for a sprint race, I think we talked about this was it last weekend?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
About how they've changed the regulations a bit on sprint weekends so that they can change the car after the sprint race, and that just seems to have a massive positive effect on the weekend in general. It helped that the grid was a little bit different between the sprint race and the Grand Prix as well, so that meant that you couldn't necessarily look at the sprint race and say, well, the main race is just going to be that, but twice as long. So yeah, I'm really actually, for somebody who spent the first like 3 seasons of the sprint races not really enjoying them at all and being quite vocal about it, I do really like them this season. They've all been very good races.
Definitely. There's just one thing I would like to see changed.
What's that?
Because I am very positive in general sense, but there was something which stood out to me this Saturday when they drove the qualifying, of course.
Yeah.
Of just before they qualified. The sprint race was 2 hours prior to that it started. So you have like 1.5 hour between the race and the qualifying.
Yeah, not a lot of time.
And I saw Norris got hit, of course, got out. First thing he was worried about was the fact if he could make qualifying.
Yeah.
Then we didn't see Leclerc taking too much risk on that turn
No.
one with Max. And in the interview, he said, because, hey, I couldn't risk hurting my chances for qualifying.
Yeah.
So if we just keep qualifying or the sprint just on a different day, but make sure they can change things between, maybe that's the solution. Of get a little bit more time between them, because we're almost there.
Yeah. It's either that or the idea that the two races use the same grid, so they have one qualifying session. So, but I don't know how you'd fit that in then, because you'd still end up then having a practice session of some sort, and then you'd maybe lose the ability to change the cars between sessions. So, I don't know what the fix is, other than starting a little bit earlier with the sprint race, and then start a little bit later as well with the main event qualifying.
Yeah, or just start later if something big happens or something.
Yeah, just try and find some time there somehow. A lot of it as well, it revolves around what's convenient for Europe, because that's where the majority of the fans are for Formula One. And that's why every race that's not in Europe tries to schedule itself so that it's at a half decent time for Europe, which for better or worse, that's just the way they do it.
True.
So that's also potentially a reason, I suppose, for losing a bit of time. I guess the race was maybe a little bit earlier in Miami than it would normally be, so that it's at a time that can be viewed live in Europe. I don't know, but yeah, it is a problem. And yeah, I mean, I heard that interview from Lando where he said he didn't even want to try and get the car back to the pits. There's no point. He didn't want to risk. If the car's damaged already, there's no point risking any more damage. Just park it, leave it. It's only sprint race. It's not worth as many points as the main event.
The thing is, he did spend his bonus from winning the Grand Prix on Sunday on crossing the track on Saturday.
Yeah. That's kind of it just feels like a stupid rule, because if he's on the outside of the track, how easily can he just get back to the pits and join his crew?
But there's just no one. They don't ever want to take a risk with that.
No, but
someone starts from the pits, don't see him. You don't want. I mean,
yeah, I suppose there's a risk of that. But if in a situation like that where we know no one's starting from the pits, he's crashed out on the first corner. It's literally 50 meters away from his team. Like,
yeah, but on the other side, what could happen is you have the safety car coming up behind him. You got a medical car if something happens in the next turn.
Agreed,
so it's always. I mean, there's just one golden rule: you don't ever cross the track without steward's permission, because you can cross the track if the stewards say, "Hey, you're good to go."
Yeah,
you can go cross the track, and he didn't ask for permission, but he just crossed the track, which of course is a safety hazard. And well, they were fairly strict this week on every penalty, on every decision they made. But if it's on safety concerns, they're extremely hard.
Yeah, there's some weird calls this weekend with some of the penalties.
We can't go into them all, but would you name one of them which stood out to you?
At least they tried to be consistent this time. Sometimes they're not. The one I would have been quite upset if they'd have called a penalty that Sainz was looking for with Piastri. And that was down at the bottom of the back straight. I can't remember what turn it is. Is it turn 11, I think, or turn 9? I can't remember. But down at the end of the back straight, Sainz thought that Piastri had run him off the road. That exact same move had happened probably a dozen times already in the race. Not once did it even get investigated. If they'd have given Piastri a penalty there, that would have been massively unfair. Whether that sort of hard racing was a little bit too harsh because they're not leaving space on the track for the person on the outside. That is a question. But if they've already set a precedent for the whole race leading up to that point that they're just not even going to bother investigating this sort of racing, then they can't suddenly start doing it with Piastri and Sainz. So I was quite happy that was just let go, because they had been doing that for the whole race so far and on the sprint race on Saturday as well.
Are you on Camp Alonso saying maybe Lewis should be investigated for his turn one move?
No, I don't think so. And that's not just because I'm a Lewis fan. I mean, there's going to be some degree of bias that I can't help, I don't think. But if you watch Alonso's on board, he made his mistake before Hamilton was even on the scene, and he wasn't looking for Hamilton. So I don't. He found a convenient person to blame in Hamilton's move after it had all kind of unfolded. But what Hamilton didn't cause him to run into. I think it was Stroll on the outside of him, who then bumped into Norris. So I thought they got it right by not calling a penalty on Hamilton because it wasn't
I didn't.
entirely his fault.
The issue was he didn't get investigated. That's what Lando
Yeah,
said. Like
maybe,
they
but
didn't even look at him.
it's a first corner incident, which there usually are a little bit more lenient on these sorts of incidents.
But why not
And
say you would have looked into it and there's no penalty? Then
well, they could have done if they wanted to. Yeah,
yeah,
I agree with
makes
that.
things a little bit easier for the outside.
Yeah, and maybe that's what they should have done. But even if they'd looked into it, I don't think it was worth any kind of penalty because
I agree with you. Let's put it. I just want to. I'm not a Lewis
Yeah.
fan either. I'm not a Lewis fan, but I do think you are definitely correct with that. But
Yeah.
I do think it could warrant an investigation. at least.
Maybe, yeah. But I think even with an investigation, they'd look at that and say that wasn't entirely Hamilton's fault. Like that was already unfolded before Hamilton arrived late on the scene. And yeah, he might have added to it, but it was already happening the way it was happening before he got there. So really, it was Fernando who went a little bit too deep, and that's what left the door wide open for Hamilton to try and dive in. And he collided with somebody, then Hamilton collided with him, and it became a bit of a wedge. And it was a little bit messy, but it's just a first corner incident. I think that you can't really lay all the blame on Lewis for. I don't think so.
Nope. I agree with you there. But next time, let's just at least say you investigated it. Make things a little bit easier, and then Lando can't say anything about it.
Yeah, maybe. But you know how I feel about Lando and the staring he does. So I think no one else seemed to be calling that out other than Fernando. So and it felt like he was calling it out because he wanted somebody else to blame for a mistake that he'd already actually made.
He's been complaining about British bias for the last 2 decades, so
Yeah,
he won't let that go anytime soon, I think, anymore.
No, probably not.
James, we get 2 topics of the show which we'll focus on, but there's a third that's I do have to mention.
Go on then.
Mr. Magnussen.
Yeah.
Shouldn't he just go back to the US to drive the other series?
He needs to be driving Destruction Derby or stock cars of some sort where Rubin's racing.
If people drive like him on the F1 lobbies in the game, he's go mental.
Exactly. The harsh defending with Hamilton and the way he piled up a bunch of penalties there. I kind of felt
it's just 35 seconds.
Yeah, I
versus 20 for Lewis. So it's. I mean,
I felt the same with the way that was unfolding as I did with Jeddah, and I still think a better solution needs to be found here, and that is that Magnussen's race is basically over when he gets his first 10-second penalty, holding up Hamilton with some pretty ambitious defending. And once he's got that 10-second penalty, and he knows that he's not got any chance of finishing in the points because he's down in 7th or 8th place in the sprint. It's only the top 8 get points, isn't it? So was he in 9th? I can't remember exactly where it was, but he was helping Hulkenberg get a point. I think Hulkenberg was in 8th. As soon as he gets his penalty, it's like, well, he's not really in the race anymore. He's got nothing to race for other than to help Hulkenberg. And he himself has made comments about how he's done this a couple of times now, and he's sacrificing his race for Hulkenberg to get points for the team. But he becomes a factor in other people's races that he's not really. Technically, with the time penalty, he's not racing those people anymore. But he can screw their race up. Now, one thing that did occur to me during the race was if he gets his first penalty, and that's a 10-second penalty, and he gets another 10-second penalty for doing the same thing. Why don't they just combine those into a drive-through and
Yeah.
just say, right, you don't serve the first 10-second penalty anymore. It all becomes one penalty. It's a 20-second penalty. That's basically a drive-through. Just do a drive-through. That gets him out of the way of the cars that he's ruining the race of. And I said this in Jeddah as well. I'm not just saying this because he's holding up Lewis Hamilton. I'm saying this because he is having an impact on a race that could be better without him, especially if he actually, that penalty could somehow instantly take effect. That's just my thought on it. But in general, his racing was pretty reckless. I will say that in the race, his incident with Sargent, I
think that's more on Sargent, honestly.
I think that was quite harsh to punish Magnussen the way they did. I feel like he was entitled to space. He had been significantly alongside him for two corners, was fighting with him pretty close, and he was alongside him going into that corner. He had his front wheel up with the middle of the Sargent's car. Sargent should, certainly the way that they seem to be judging these calls in the past, it feels like it was Sargent's obligation to leave some space for him. He was entitled to space there. And it's not like he'd done the classic, I'll just brake 10 metres later so that I'm in line with you, but really I'm not taking the corner properly and I'm flying off the track before the corner's over. He was driving under control. He was alongside his opponent going into that corner at the time, and Sargent just turned in on him. Not a traditional overtaking position on the track, I suppose. So Sargent maybe wasn't expecting him to be there, but that's still kind of on Sargent to look.
Yeah, I do think if you follow the rules on the letter, that's a saying, then it does says if you are in front of the corner, it's your corner you have the right of the corner, which technically meant that, although I definitely agree with you, right? I would have backed out if I was Sargent, like at least leave space because he's there.
Yeah.
But technically, Sargent had the right to the corner and Magnussen should have backed out at that point.
Yeah.
However, I do still agree on the fact that it shows a little bit lack of awareness or stubbornness from Sargent to just go in like he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Because he was still there. And you're still driving, with all due respect, you are driving Magnussen, who is not going to back out there. And the next corner is on the left-hander. So if you just stay in position, you'd probably have him anyways. So I think technically it was a rightful penalty for Magnussen. Racecraft, I still think it's poorly executed. And, well, now it hurts both of them, right?
The thing that's a problem for me is it means you can't even. I mean, a driver was already been, or drivers have already been hesitant to just stick a nose in anyway, because if they're not significantly, if they're not like far enough alongside, then that's kind of, it becomes a penalty to them for, causing a collision or whatever the penalty would be. But in this instance, he had his front wheel, like he was more than half a car alongside Sargent at that point, and that's certainly been a thing in the past. If you've got your front wheel past the rear axle of the car in front, then you're kind of entitled to space. So I don't know. I don't know where the balance is, but that felt like, as soon as that penalty came through, it's like, well, we're just saying that these guys can't really race anymore because that felt like that move was on for Magnussen. That wasn't over ambition. That was, he's in a good spot to fight for that corner. So yeah, maybe to the letter that, like you just said, the letter of the law is that it's a penalty, but at the same time, that's...
If we were sim racing and it would happen to me if I was Magnussen, I was like, come on, mate, where should I go? Should I finish it in here? So, yeah. But anyways, I do let quickly throw back into the topic of Magnussen. Way too far, way too harsh, way too much in one weekend. Andrew, who sent in a bunch of questions and remarks this week, so I'll take some of them out. One of the messages he sent is, it's been happening somewhat frequently. I don't understand why a racer is allowed to continue and not to be like disqualified, ejected, red carded, for example, if that driver knocks another driver out of the race and receives a penalty for his actions. I think that's what you just said. The fact that you like penalties just stack instead of being punished for carrying too many in one race. I think that's actually the best solution. You get one time penalty. The second time penalty means it's stop and go. Period.
Yeah, and you just remove all
Or
previous
drive through even.
penalties
I
and
know stop and
apply.
go is maybe a little bit too harsh.
Yeah, yeah. Whatever they choose, though, you just remove the previous penalties, and you just lump them all in together. And that one penalty should be something that takes you out of the race at least long enough for the cars that he was around and affecting to get on with their race. Yeah.
For everyone that's new to Formula One, what's a drive through or stop and go penalty?
Drive through is just drive through the pits, which sounds fine, but obviously driving through the pits, they're only doing 40 kilometers an hour or something.
80, I think. That depends
it?
on the track, basically, as well.
Yeah, I know
But
some of
slow.
it, like Monza's, not Monza, sorry, Monaco's slower speed. I think there are some pit lanes that are narrow where they're slower, but yeah, basically they're going a lot slower than they would be if they were on the racetrack, and it tends to average out about 20 seconds they lose by going just for driving through the pits rather than driving on the track. A stop and go penalty is basically the same thing, apart from you stopping your pit box. Car's not allowed to be touched. In fact, a stop and go isn't even like the time penalties that we currently get. Stop and go is literally you have to come into the pits. You have to stop in the pits for however long that time penalty is, which is normally 5 seconds or 10. And then you leave again. And the car cannot be worked on. That cannot be turned into a pit stop for a stop and go. The time penalties, they do allow to be added onto a pit stop because that's just like a 5 second or 10-second penalty to the race. So if you serve that during a pit stop, it's still effectively putting that time on your race time. But yeah, that's what those are.
Awesome. Well, great explanation. And sorry, K-Mac, but I feel like they've told K-Mac that he should drive in service of Nico Hülkenberg, make sure Nico gets points, and that's how he sort of drives. But if you look at his interviews, it's not like he really likes doing it, I think. And in the comments, he says, no, I did it on purpose because I just want to make sure Nico gets points. Felt really deliberately that maybe even steering the pot to make sure get some attention that he doesn't actually want to drive in service of Nico.
But then how's Nico repaying the team? He's leaving. He's going to kick Sauber next year.
Well, he's still getting points. So
I know he's still getting points, but at the same time, it's like maybe you start trying to benefit Hülkenberg if Hülkenberg's looking racy for a race. But
but also Hülkenberg, Nico just is in the far better position during a race most of the time.
Yeah, agreed.
K-Mac is better qualifier and basically get outspaced. Like Magnussen gets outpaced by Hülkenberg as well every single race so far.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you can't really expect him to drop off just to make sure Kevin looks a little bit better. So
yeah,
and every point is a lot these days, especially now. VCarb is getting some points as well.
Yeah, it's worth a lot to them, especially the teams further down the field in the Constructors' Championship. Yeah.
Talking about VCarb, it's time to talk about Daniel Ricciardo.
Okay.
James.
Yeah.
What a sprint race. The comeback. Andrew says as well, I wasn't watching F1 when he was at Red Bull, but it was very cool to see him have such a cool race. That was Saturday.
Yeah.
Amazing defending, perfect positioning, big smile on his face, cheering up, being fast, looking exceptionally smart in that V-Corp car as well, by the way. I think beautiful livery.
Yeah.
Just wish they'd done the top part as well, by the way, but it's a different story.
Yeah.
But I think he left those keys at home. I don't know if he wears lucky undershorts or something, but he left them at home for Sunday.
Yeah. His sprint race, his sprint qualifying, everyone kind of got caught out on the sprint qualifying with not really setting times even as good as they'd set on the mediums in sprint qualifying 2. This is in sprint qualifying 3. So I think the tyre allocation for sprint qualifying, was it mediums for SQ1, mediums for SQ2, and then softs for
Yes,
SQ3,
I
wasn't it?
think so. Yeah.
There was no hard tyre this time. And the mediums seemed to perform really, really well. And when they went onto the softs for SQ3,
Didn't make much of a difference.
no, some of the times were actually slower than the times they set on the mediums. I think Norris's SQ2 time,
Was the fastest overall.
it was still the fastest lap of the weekend, certainly going into qualifying proper for the main event, Grand Prix qualifying. So I think what happened there was that everyone kind of suffered a bit. I know Verstappen was a little bit surprised in both of those sessions. Yeah, Ricciardo also felt that he'd not really set a great time, but then ended up was he third or fourth
Fourth.
on the grid? Yeah, so he
And he actually was third by the first corner. So
yeah, he did remarkably well in the sprint qualifying, and his race, it was just classic Ricciardo. And sorry, was it Andrew or Andy?
Andrew.
Andrew who asked the question, saying that he wasn't watching Formula One during, maybe Ricciardo at Red Bull or whatever, when he was getting the occasional win and podiums and stuff like that. Like that sprint race is how Ricciardo used to race, and that's where you'd expect, certainly at that time, to see Ricciardo. You'd expect to see him in the top 5 very consistently, if not on the podium quite consistently. The Grand Prix, though, he had a 3-place penalty anyway, and I think he qualified something like 18th, was it? Didn't make out of Q1, unfortunately, and that just wrecked the rest of his weekend. I don't know how he didn't make it out of Q1 based on how things went in the sprint qualifying. Conditions seem to be broadly the same. I don't know if he'd had
Still weird track though. I mean,
yeah, I don't know if I had some sloppy laps or something, and it just it didn't quite come together for him on Sunday the way that it had done. Sorry, on Saturday afternoon the way that it had it on Friday
I feel there
afternoon.
are two things going on there. One is nobody actually was able to just link a perfect lap together.
Yeah,
And I think two is it was so amazingly close. Like
yeah,
between P1 and P16, there were like 6 tenths, I think, at one point.
yeah,
And then Daniel missed out by half a tenth or something. So
yeah.
it felt harsh, and that makes a big difference. But I don't actually think it was that bad. But this track does two things. One, if you just follow the lines, with all due respect, I think they all drive about the same. You can't really make much of a difference with a car.
Hmm.
Two, it was so low on grip, and combine that with the fact they brought all the hardest tires with them.
Yeah,
There's no strategies on tires either. And the medium were as fast, like you said, as the soft. Nobody at all got the softs to work this whole weekend.
no, absolutely.
And that means that many just guessed wrong, and that's where the disadvantage of just having one free practice as well. You can't really do a long, you can't really do a long run, or you do a long run and go for the qualifier. You leave, so it's you can't really go many things, and it doesn't help that
No,
Charles parked his car the other way around in the first lap either, so they missed 15
yeah,
minutes of practice as well. So I do feel it was just also a little bit unlucky, if that makes sense.
yeah. I
Then he
think so.
pitted then he pitted, and the next lap the safety car came in the race as well. So
Yeah,
ah,
he did have a little bit of classic Ricciardo bad luck that he just seemed to develop towards the end of his Red Bull stint, and then going into Renault and McLaren. I mean, he just didn't seem to get on with the McLaren car anyway. But
just won a
that's
race with it. But
yeah,
that's
that's a different topic anyway. But I think finishing P15, I think was still not a bad not too bad of a result for him. If you
Yeah.
consider the way the race went, like you just said, he pits and then literally the next lap, safety car comes out. I mean, if he'd managed, if the strategy they just decided, well, in 2 laps time we'll pit, and then he gets the safety car and he gets his effectively a 10-second pit stop rather than 20. He's potentially finishing in the points with that. So, he had a little bit of bad luck. It didn't help that he came into the weekend with a 3-place grid penalty from
Still a
the race
silly
in
penalty,
China.
which I don't think he could do much about. If I'm still.
No, I agree, and I think all in all, I've certainly seen on social media that he's been rated pretty badly for the weekend in general, and I think that's unfair. I think his weekend was okay. I think certainly his sprint race was very, very good, outstanding. Even if only it had been worth more points, and his actual Grand Prix result, I think it was just kind of okay. I wouldn't say it was particularly bad. Getting up to P15 is, from dead last on the grid.
No, I think generally speaking, if you look at F1.com, for example, they rated him. They say winner or losers, right? They definitely
Yeah,
gave him a positive vibe and named him a winner after Saturday, of course. The thing is,
yeah.
though, Yuki Tsunoda still points again.
Tsunoda finished 7th, which is a great result for VCAR, as we
14
need to be
points so
calling
far
it.
in 6 races for VCARP from Yuki
Yeah,
himself.
yeah. That's a really good result for them, splitting the Mercedes as well. He did.
He's just 3 points
Yeah,
short. Yuki, he's 3 points short of last season's total points
yeah,
after six
yeah.
races.
He's
So
he's having a solid start to the season.
I would say terrific, even.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but I'm glad Daniel picked up. That's why I wanted to highlight him this week. And I think let's hope to get some more action from him because you saw that
yeah.
once he gets going and if he's then in the flow, he's a terrific driver. The
That's it.
defending on Sainz was just absolutely beautiful lap after lap after lap. So
Yeah,
please give us more of that.
yeah. I mean, I've talked about his bad luck. Some of it, it's not all been bad luck. There's been things where he's got stuff wrong as well. He just needs like a good run. He just
Yeah.
needs a little bit of luck on his side and to do well. And I feel like the momentum would like be with him from that point, and he'd start having much better races. Um, I just want to see that from him. I really do, especially because if things don't pick up, you kind of start worrying like, is this his last season in Formula One then? Because
Which before this weekend, I would say rightfully so.
yeah,
But who
but you've
knows?
got Lawson kind of waiting desperately for a seat, and Red Bull aren't going to be able to hang on to him if they can't get him a seat in Formula One. He'll just go elsewhere. So yeah, Ricciardo's he's got a lot of pressure on him for the rest of the season.
Definitely. Talking about pressure, time for our second focus topic because Lando Norris finally, well, if I can say so directly, did not collapse under pressure, James.
Yeah, what a race! Phenomenal. The only downside to the Lando Norris win is going to be the lack of Lando Norris hasn't won a race memes. I'm going to miss those. I don't know if you've ever seen any of them.
Yeah, and I
Like
think
like
his
they're
nickname was the
fake.
best nickname ever, Lando No Win.
Yeah. My favorite one was a fake like a mocked up capture screen of like select all the race winners, and it had everyone, and then just Lando Norris's face in the middle. Um, I felt bad for him because this has been a long time coming. Everyone seems to be in agreement on that. He's had race winning potential pretty much since he first came into the sport. The fact that it's taken this long, I think, when we look back on this in say like 10 or 20 years time, or anyone just looks back on it in that in that time period, looks back at this now, they're going to be like, how did Lando Norris take 100 Grand Prix to win a race, his first race.
I'm afraid because Max Verstappen was driving there as well.
Well, there is that. And then obviously, but he's had the car to do what Verstappen has done in the past, where he would sneak wins when the other guy's outperforming. He's had the car to do that, and that's what he had this weekend in Miami. And
I saw 2 weeks ago that he lost the sprint race on turn 1.
yeah,
Right, so he has a tendency of overdoing it when under pressure or being in a good position.
Yeah,
and I think one of the biggest advantages, Max just wasn't able to put any pressure on him.
Yeah,
which made it a little bit easier for him, I think, in his mind.
Yeah,
although it's still bet he would be nervous at the end.
Oh, guaranteed. I suspect those last 5 laps, he would have been, his heart would have been racing, and he would have been so nervous of just making a mistake. And one of the things actually picked up on the UK commentary was, they said on his final lap, they were like, yeah, he's still pushing hard. And I think he kind of had to, because I don't know if you have the same problem. And I mean, this is a completely different world. Just talking about like racing in the sim.
You can't relax. Else you make a mistake.
If you start driving slow, it kind of snowballs and you drive too slow. So he has to keep pushing on. And, all these top drivers, I think, know that. I mean, some of them might lift the pedal a bit when they're 20 seconds ahead. But, Lando wasn't that far ahead. I think if he'd eased off a little bit with like 5 laps to go, it could have gone drastically wrong. So he just had to keep racing his own race, treating it like, some sort of practice session or whatever, just hitting the same braking points, hitting the same apexes every corner and getting it, getting every lap clean and consistent. And he did that under immense pressure to finally kind of break this almost like curse that everyone kind of acts like he's had for not being able to win a race, and he finally got it. I don't know what else to say about him. It's like, it was...
You'd struggle to find a person in the paddock who wasn't happy for him as well, right?
Yeah, everyone was so pleased for him. You could see, every driver that drove past him on the track was giving him a thumbs up and a round of applause. The amount of people that came over and congratulated him in the paddock after he'd got out of the car, all the people that seemed to be, giving him praise after the podium and stuff. Like, he's clearly a very popular character in the paddock. And I think if you pay any attention to like his social media and just his general kind of demeanor in interviews and press conferences and stuff, he just seems like somebody with a good sense of humor and that, would be easy to like. So, yeah, I'm really happy for him. I think that was a really good, really clean race in general. He was a little bit lucky with the safety car, but you've got to maximize that. You can't. I think we've been saying, certainly I have, from the start, like for Red Bull to get this like immense streak that they've been on, and like last year winning all but 1 races. That's like a perfect storm, and we've said before, like all it takes is one badly timed safety car, badly timed red flag, whatever, and it can break that streak for them. And there was an element of that in this race because the safety car did benefit Lando. But once that safety car came in, Lando consistently was pulling away from Max Verstappen in a Red Bull. So he, even under pressure, he's driving well and he's pulling that gap, and he's, that, I think that probably for him, and certainly in the paddock, probably adds more weight to that victory than if Perez had just wiped out Max in the first corner and Lando had still gone on to win it. There'd always be that kind of question mark over it, like, why can't win it because the Red Bulls were out of the race?
That's how Max won his first race anyways. So.
Oh yeah, true. But I think winning the race with both Red Bulls still on the circuit is just that, probably just makes the victory all that more sweeter for him.
Definitely. And I don't want to undersell this victory because terrific race. He optimized everything. I still think the safety car deployment, I could have done a whole different podcast about that one.
Yeah,
Didn't
there was
hurt
something
him.
odd there.
Let's put it like that.
No, wait.
And
I did mean to go back and watch this, but he seemed to slip past before the safety car was like properly deployed.
the safety car just picked up Max while he should have picked up Norris.
Well, it
Which
shouldn't.
means
Yeah,
that if Norris would have gone for the pit stop, right, he wouldn't have the
yeah,
30-second lead to actually do that pit stop, and he would have been ending up behind Max and behind the Ferraris. After
yeah.
this. So
He would have come out either very very close, like either just in front of Max or just behind him. It would have been close because they were about 11 seconds apart at the start of the very start of the safety car deployment.
yeah, but once it got deployed, it was 30 seconds.
Well, yeah, by the time it came around, but I think if everything had carried on normal, like he still would have pitted, and he still would have been in either first or second place because his pit stop effectively becomes a 10-second.
Yeah,
pit
Norris
stop
said that he expected to be just behind Ferraris in this situation. He had to beat both Ferraris and Max. But then again, like Max said himself, if, right?
Yep.
If my mom had, well, you know what he said. So
Yeah.
It's also just you have to be a little bit lucky at times and then optimize it.
Yeah.
And the other side is, I think you see in sprint weekends that the Red Bulls aren't on their best form. You see in this weekend, there's no tire degradations, which means you don't have the grip on it as well, which doesn't help. And you have Max that has a car that's understeering, which he absolutely hates. And he's been complaining about all weekend. I was very surprised he even got pole position in and won the sprint race. He was even surprised by it. So that car just hasn't been working all weekend. And like Max said, I'll behind. If I have a bad weekend and it still means speed too, and my best friend wins the race, no, that's not a bad weekend either.
Yeah.
So I'm Andrew, and we see a lot of people asking, but Andrew, let's continue with highlighting Andrew's questions this week. He says, was this a one-off, or have things actually changed? As it seems like a lot of cars were now as fast as the Red Bull, namely the McLaren.
It would be interesting to see. I think it's too difficult to call it one way or another. The thing is that McLaren did bring some significant upgrades to this race. Whether those upgrades were really being shown properly against the Red Bull is up for debate, just because, like you said, it's a bit of an outlier track. The only thing I would say, though, is that this time last year, Max started P9 and then he went on to win the race by about 15 seconds.
Yeah, on the softer tires, though.
Yeah, agreed. But still, the Red Bull was dominant at the track. So,
and it wasn't a sprint weekend.
Yeah, it wasn't a sprint weekend, so they had more time to dial the car in with 3 proper practice sessions.
Here's my point. Let's put, like, just simple stats. In Japan, Max won a second a lap over everyone else.
Yeah.
I can't see any upgrade bringing a second a lap. That's my bold statement.
I can't. But then look what McLaren did last year.
Still not a second a lap. Like, it's impressive, and they had an amazing race at Silverstone last week.
But it was like 7/10. It was still a huge leap.
Definitely, but second is a lot.
I know a second is a lot.
So
I agree,
and that's why I'm like, well, we could actually see McLaren being up there from time to time for sure. Mm-hmm. On sprint weekends or weekends where you have outliers, so rain or I don't want to call the pit stop lucky because I think Max had that same luck and that same bad luck as well. Ever happens to everyone that's in the lead of a race sometimes. So that just happens, and I think that's what also Max said. Like, this is just racing. It happens. Because I think he was a good loser. Let's put it like this as well. But I don't think I can't see one upgrade making this amount of difference. If that makes sense, because he also wasn't on top speed in P1 near the pole position, for example, or if you know what I mean. It's still not. I'm glad it happened. Very much. Yeah. I'm actually very glad for the sport as well. And for the podcast, because it does make more people tune in if we don't get the same winner every time. I don't think the Red Bull is that dominant as they were. Definitely not.
No.
But I do still think a Red Bull should be objectively faster than a McLaren. And I think in Monza, for example, where we're now going to, and it's not a sprint race. If that's just a dry track, we should not expect the McLarens beating Red Bulls.
Is it not Imola next?
Sorry, I am. Yes, I don't know why. Maybe they're in the same country or something.
Yeah,
but,
sorry.
but
I think so. I think that, like you said,
I hope
the
so,
Red
though.
Bull,
I hope they'd fight for the. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
But
I do. I think, like you said, I think the Red Bull is already proving this year that it's not. It's don't get me wrong. It is a strong car, and it is still probably, well, not even probably, it's still the best car on the grid.
and it's still the best, right?
But it is not the force that it was versus everybody else last year. I think. I mean, I was going to say Perez in Australia kind of helped kind of highlight that a little bit, but
Here's my issue though with this point is that Max still got 6 out of 6 pole position.
yeah,
Max still
he
won
has.
4 out of 6 races, but one he just had a technical issues, which just
Plus-
happens, and he got second in the race, which had a bad weekend. If you leave almost nothing on the table and your car isn't considered even dominant, I mean, still by gap.
Yeah, it's like I said. That I mean, I agree. It's still a strong car. I think it's kind of proving that it's maybe not quite as strong as it was last year, and that is mainly because last year it only really had one race where it kind of didn't perform, and that was Singapore.
But there are a lot of races where it didn't get to qualify near pole position.
No, that's true. Whether that's something that they've changed, it's a characteristic about the car that's changed between last year and this year, and that is then, it's got as good single lap pace as it has race pace. Who knows, really, other than, the engineers of Red Bull right at the very top of the engineering team, probably. But I do think, yeah, I think, I certainly would hope that we'd see McLaren fighting with them now and then. I mean, look
Definitely.
at
I mean, don't discriminate from me there, right?
Silverstone last year. After they brought their big upgrade package last year,
Yeah,
they
they
were
performed
fighting.
extremely well.
Yeah, and at one point they were fighting for the victory. And Norris was like, he was keeping pace with Verstappen pretty good for chunks of that race.
Although there, I think it's something to be said that is their race; they should perform it, and I'm pretty sure they took new engines,
Maybe,
which
yeah,
caused them harm later on the season. Well, the Red Bulls used the 3 they applied
yeah,
to
but
the whole season. So
they still went from, being down near the bottom
fair.
5 of the
They are
field
very
to
good in
being in the top
development.
5
Let's
of the
put it
field.
that McLaren is definitely on top of their development game.
Yeah, and I think
For sure.
Zach Brown and the rest of McLaren in general, when talking in interviews, certainly lately with Adrian Newey potentially hitting the market, or not even
We
potentially,
don't
that's
care.
confirmed. The McLaren are basically saying, yeah, we're happy with the course we're on and with the team we've got. Based on the way the back end of last season went, and this season, or certainly this race, just went with upgrades that they brought to Miami, then they have no reason not to feel confident.
True. I would like to see Max next year in McLaren, but that's maybe a topic for the for the bonus show.
There's no way they get rid of Norris, and I'd be surprised if they got rid of Piastri at this point. I think they're probably
On the
happy
other
with
side,
the lineup.
anyone will take Max still.
Yeah,
Especially someone that brings in sponsors and loves putting as much labels on their car as possible.
well, being
Mr.
orange
Brown.
helps as well. So
Orange, it does help definitely.
Yeah,
We'll see that next year.
Yeah,
James, fair to say, kudos to Lando Norris. Can't wait for
100%.
actually 2 weeks. Imola, not Monza, Imola, which is an old-fashioned racetrack, so it might look a bit different there. Or they'll surprise anyone and we actually have a title fight maybe on our hands. Who knows? Who knows? We can
No
only
sprint
hope.
no sprint race next race either. So it'll be back to normal ish. So that might be a better indicator of how good these McLaren upgrades actually are next race.
Definitely. Race. Well, we've got one more question from Andrew.
Okay.
We have to make it short because you also have for predictions. But is Alpine starting to figure things out? P10 and 12 for the Frenchmen's are so much better.
I don't know.
Or did I get it right with one for FP1 in a sprint weekend?
It could just be that. And also, we've just talked about how all the cars are not kind of. There's a bit of a mix of performance this weekend. The track, the tyres, the fact that it's a sprint weekend. To be fair to Alpine, I feel like they've had a couple of races where the race pace has actually kind of been a little bit better than qualifying in other races. So, but I don't recall reading anything about them bringing any upgrades. So I don't know if this was just a case of they actually worked well with the track and the tyre situation that other teams were perhaps struggling with.
I think it's the same story. It's cool to see them there. We just don't know if this is an outlier on an outlier track.
Yeah.
With a weird weekend format compared to the rest. Or they actually are back. Honestly, I'd be surprised if they stick around for next week.
Yeah, I personally, I don't expect them to do well in Imola, but we'll see. It's a difficult one because Formula One, the calendar's only ever like 24 races, and when you start trying to dig into, well, I say only, yeah, I mean 24 is a lot of races in a year now, but when you try to dig into stuff like this, it's really difficult because you don't actually, you can, it's hard to get like a good sample size, and then there's so many variables that it just, I suppose that's what makes it the pinnacle of motorsport, really, is that you kind of, it's so competitive, even the slow teams, like if other teams around them are having an off weekend, there's always going to be another team right there on their heels chomping away, wanting to steal that place or those points. And that's what can make Formula One so good. And that's the best seasons are when it's close racing like that.
Definitely. Talk about close and stealing some points. Think I can still await some points from you in the prediction contest we got going.
I'm pretty sure you did this weekend, unfortunately for me.
The results were 12-10 in your advantage. We both predicted Max on pole position, which means it's 13-11 in your advantage. We both predicted Max to win. Well, that went wrong.
I don't think either of us would have predicted
Norris to
win this. No.
The first DNF, you said Ocon, and I said you said Ocon, and I said Yuki.
Yeah.
Well, we both didn't get that right.
Points.
So that's that. And we said, how much is the gap between the leader and the number 2?
Yeah.
And I said 14 seconds, and you said 20 seconds. This situation, it was about 7-something seconds, I think.
It was 7.6. Yeah.
Yes, between Lando and Max. Of course, we both didn't predict Max. So I got a point there, which means we're currently at 13-12 for your advantage.
Close battle.
We're getting there. I like it. James, Imola next, old-fashioned racing track. Who's going to take pole position? Is Max going to break Senna's record?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Max on pole. I was tempted to say Leclerc. He's looked very good and on Verstappen's heels this weekend, but we're kind of back to a normal weekend. It's not sprint weekend. I think it's just going to be Max on pole.
I'm going to go for Leclerc.
Okay.
Let's see if we can either open up the gap or close it all together. And I think he's on the record with Senna now, right? 7 in a row. I think he's on 7 now. 6 this year, 1 last year, 7 consecutive pole positions. So I think he needs 8 for the record, which means he doesn't get the record. And I think he really likes the record. But hey, that's another question. James, who will win Imola? If you say Lando Norris and he actually wins, you get 2 points.
For the exact same reasons I just gave for Max being on pole, I have to say Max winning the race. I think.
I'm gonna go with Max as well in this situation.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I'd love to see the Ferraris pushing the Red Bulls. I'd love to see the McLarens pushing the Red Bulls. But I think going back to just a traditional race circuit, not a street circuit with a fake marina on one of the corners. I just expect Red Bull really to be back to their winning ways. I think, and it will. Yeah, like we just said, I think this will be this next race will prove one way or another how good those.
Can't really overtake either too easy on.
No, it's a difficult one to pass on, but hopefully it'll show us how good those McLaren upgrades actually are on a more kind of regular weekend.
Yes.
I'm hoping they will prove to have been good upgrades.
So who's going to be the first DNF that weekend? In the race, of course, right?
I'm going to go with K-Mag. He's on 10 penalty points now, apparently. 2 more and he gets his...
Berman gets his seat, but he probably gets his seat permanently, I think, if that happens.
Yeah.
Which I think someone is hoping.
I think he got... Did he get 6 penalty points this weekend alone? Yeah. Insane. I mean, it's... Yeah.
6 penalty points and a bad reputation for K-Mag.
Yeah.
K-Mag for you. I could go the other way around and say it's going to be Lando Norris.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. So I'm going to say... I have to be right one day when I say Sargent, no?
Yeah, I mean, technically you would have been right this weekend.
Yeah, again.
Was it Sargent first?
Yeah.
I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the only DNF even.
Poor Sargent, not even his fault.
Yeah, but it wasn't entirely his fault. Yeah, it was, yeah.
I am going for Sargent. Why not?
Okay.
James,
Is Sargent even racing next weekend? I mean, apparently they're trying to get an exception for Antonelli.
Yeah, but he's not driving right away.
No.
So I can't see that happen. James, every single week okay, I'm gonna change my prediction. No. Every single week when we have a podcast, we say a question which considers numbers, and whoever comes closest with their guess to the actual number that answers the question wins a extra point.
Yeah.
This week it's my turn to ask the question. Well, I had in my mind that it was Monza, which of course it isn't. No. This question just suddenly looked a little bit weirder because my question was, what is going to be the top speed on the speed traps?
Top speed on the speed traps. This is a very difficult one for me because that's not a stat I ever look at.
No, so I thought I'd give you an indication of what was it the last time you were at Imola.
Okay.
Which I don't think is much. It's actually way too much information to get you the point, but hey, here you go. And the top speed was 296.7 kilometers an hour. So 296.7. I have no idea how much that is in miles, if I'm quite honest.
No, I mean, that
was the top speed by Checo Perez. 296.7.
Wow. I mean, that's some speed, and that track.
Well, just in consideration, Monza was 354.
Yeah.
So that's why I was actually thinking about that question. I might have to repeat this year.
That might make this question more interesting, actually, being at Imola rather than Monza, because it's going to be harder to predict. I mean, thing is that Imola doesn't have too many decent straights, if I can remember it correctly.
No. It's definitely a tricky circuit to get onto top speed. So it's got a wide variety of corners. It's an old school trade, like maximum velocity is second relative to balance and traction. It's a hard thing to set up your car for. So
yeah, we'll go a track layout. I'm trying to remember if it's the circuit. Yeah, it is the circuit I'm thinking of. Yeah. There's not any particularly long straights. It is a very difficult track to overtake at, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very narrow as well.
Yeah, it is. And that's what I was going to say when you mentioned that speed. My immediate thought was that is a heck of a speed for quite a claustrophobic feeling
Yeah, you
track.
get the long haul towards the Tumbarella chicane, I think, where most of the
Yeah,
most where 99% of any overtake gets done as well. I think that's where you get the overtake, and that's where you also get the top speed when you have the DRS there as well. So,
yeah,
but usually it gets qualifying is where they set the top speed. So
yeah. So was it 297 something?
296.7.
296.7. I'm gonna go just 298 on the dot. I'm gonna imagine they'll be a little bit quicker this year.
Starting to rain, I just see. So no, I don't know. It's 2 weeks, so
Nah.
nobody knows, mate. I'm just kidding. You say 298
Yeah.
in the speed trap towards that corner. I'll go below that. I'll go 297.9.
Really?
I need those points, buddy. No, it would be a
What if
bit cheeky
it's
for me to do that. Eh?
what if it's 297.95?
Then we get another point. So I go 297.99.
All right, okay.
Just to make sure that never happens again. No, I think it's pretty much on one decimal, honestly. So
Yeah.
we won't see that. So I'll say now. I'll make it more fun. I'll say 296. What was it? 296.7. I'm going to say 296.7 again. There you go.
Okay.
So it
Yeah.
could still be stuck in the middle and you still win by 1/10 of a
Yeah,
second.
because if Red Bull set the fastest speed last year,
2 years ago, right?
I don't know. Was it not last year?
I don't think we drove at Imola last week, but it could be me.
Yeah, no, I'm not entirely sure.
But hey,
No, you're right. I think we missed 2023.
that's right.
Yeah, in that case, just forget what I was about to say because it's irrelevant.
I'm talking about speed trap finish, not the finish line finish. So there's just a little bit difference there. For example, last time Max drove there, the 295.4 was his speed trap, so 295.4, while his finish line was 277. So there's a major difference there.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the speed trap. All right, we got that settled. I am very much looking forward to Imola. Who knows? Might do a little side project show next week. So if you have any questions, let us know because we'll be sitting in the sun on the beach in Crete doing activities for another podcast we do. But that doesn't mean we can't accidentally sneak one of the Formula One shows in, even if there's no show, no race actually.
Time.
So send us questions. If you have any questions, we might be able to hook something up when we're there, as long as you bring along your microphones.
Yes.
But we'll get it sorted. James, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
See you I'll see you this weekend, but we'll see everyone that's listening to us maybe next week, but at least in 2 weeks after the Italian. Is it the Italian or is it European? I don't even know. After Imola.
I think it's the European. No, is it Italian? I don't know.
We'll see you after Imola.
Yeah.
Race on. Bye-bye.
See you later.